Welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us today discussing real legal issues that we experience on a day-to-day basis. We have Sergey Kalantarov from Kalantarov Law. He is a pioneer in his field who's had a very interesting trajectory in his legal career, and I'm sure he will definitely go deep into it with us today. Sergey practices real estate law, business, formulating businesses for companies, big and small, and immigration. Sergey, it is a pleasure to have you here today with us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, before we jump in, I do have to say, just the other day, I was having a conversation with a legal intern that works for me, and I asked him, hey, are you familiar with this podcast I might be on? And he said, yeah, I actually, me and my friends listen to it all the time, and we actually have so much value from this podcast. I want to commend what the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You're touching a lot of lives.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
We're definitely trying to do our mentorship duties, and we want to get, a lot of the youth are very confused about what kind of law they might want to practice. So we want to definitely give them ideas about what they might be interested in. So,
and whether law school is the right place for them, and if after law school, if they still, you don't have to necessarily practice law, you could do other things and you can always come back to it, which I'm sure you'll get into briefly, just having off the record conversation with you earlier. So tell us, how is your trajectory from law school?
Yeah, so went to law school in St. John's University, finished undergrad in St. John's, took a year off, studied for my LSAT, and then joined St. John's Law School. You had my friend on here, Emmanuel, so that was good company while I was in law school. He's a great friend of mine. So while in law school, I want to say that first year was tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. First year was a really tough year, right? So I did okay the first year. And this is coming from a background of being summa cum laude in St. John's, being the number one in my class in high school, all throughout college, and now joining these group of people that are just so exceptional, right? You're in a classroom of 100 people, and these guys are all exceptional from all different backgrounds. So in St. John's undergrad, I actually majored in legal studies, and then I minored in advertising and business. So what I would say to the people that are thinking about going to law school is diversify, right? That's probably the first mistake I made, is going into legal studies. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to have an advantage, right? Going to law school, I have this background in legal studies. And little do I know that 2 weeks into law school, I'm right there with everybody else, because everything that I learned in legal studies was done within 2 weeks of law school. So I was like, oh, wow, I just missed out on 4 years of potentially having a completely different path, right? And in law school, we had pharmacists that wanted to become lawyers. Yeah. We had people from the medical profession, people from business backgrounds. So that's the number one thing I'll tell people that are going into, first of all, undergrad, right? Select a major that will set you apart from everybody else, what you're really, truly passionate about, and then law school will do law school, right? So that was my path. Graduated summa cum laude, top of the class, and now I'm in the midst of all of these intellectuals. And, I found myself just being average for the first time ever in my life. I always stood out, but now I'm just like average, right? First year of law school. And at the end of first year of law school, I did okay. I did well. We get married. I married my wife. So at the end of first year, we get married. Second year was much more easier in law school, right? So the first year is probably the toughest. You got to stick it out. And then second year, we have our first child. And now I find myself in the position, I'm married, I have a first child, I need to support myself, right? And, before, thank God for the support system of my parents, they were supporting us. So now I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? And the number one thing I know how to do is jewelry, because I come from a jewelry background, right? like every other Bahari does. So my brother-in-law and I, we opened up a small little jewelry store in Queens. And that went really well. So that kept me afloat all throughout law school, and we did really well over there. And even after I finished law school, I had this great aversion to law. I just couldn't see a legal textbook ever again. I couldn't practice it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I distanced myself from law school, right? And so I spent the next 2-3 years building up this jewelry practice. And we did really well. And it was up until, so I graduated 2013. And in around December of 2015, I approached my partner and I said, listen, I love it. We're making great money. I love sales. Like I'm passionate about sales. There's a high that I get from sales, but I just can't seem to stick around for jewelry anymore because I wasn't mentally stimulated. Yeah, I wasn't intellectually stimulated. I wasn't challenged, right? The money's good. Everything's good. Business was great, but I needed to go back to my call. And that's exactly what I did. So I said, I'm going to spend the holiday season, which is, the most busiest season of the year. I'm going to spend that. And then we're going to have to part ways. And I'm going to go open up my own practice. And that's exactly what I did. I rented a small little office in Forest Hills in a Regis type of workspace environment. And I started operating. So that was January of 2016.
And what did you start operating in terms of what type of practices?
Yeah, so I started off with real estate because I was always passionate about real estate. Ever since college, I was flipping homes. So that was always a passion of mine. And then I started getting into immigration, right? I'm in the area, Forest Hills, Regal Park, that's our community. So people started reaching out to me on immigration matters. And believe it or not, one of my first clients was my father. So my father at the time was living in Israel. So my father immigrates to the United States, and I said, I'll do everything. I'm straight out of law school, but I gave him a promise that I'll take care of it, right? And so at that point, I didn't know anything about immigration law, right? So we go to one immigration attorney, we go to another, and they're quoting us this, they're quoting us that. And I'm sitting to myself thinking, okay, how far can it be? Let me do it myself. Let me take a stab at it, right? And who more is going to pay attention to this matter for my father than his own son?
Of course.
And so my father was my first ever immigration client.
Wow. That's
a big risk we took.
And that's very motivating, actually. Yes.
Yeah. And so after that, I was like, this was a great experience. I can do this and provide this type of service to the public and to our community. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow, that's amazing.
And did you stick to it and build from there?
Yeah. So the immigration practice actually took over, and it was probably half of what I was focusing on.
Okay, and the other half was the majority of real estate.
Yeah.
And you did mostly a residential or commercial real estate?
Residential, yeah.
So your practice area was Forest Hills?
Forest Hills, Regal Park, so a lot of transactions, Queens, Brooklyn, the 5 boroughs.
So tell me, how did your family dynamic play into all of this? Once you opened up your practice, How was your time management? How was your wife handling it? How many children did you have already at that time? A growing family.
Yeah. So once I opened up, my wife was still in school. So my wife is a registered nurse now, right? So we were sort of coming up together. She was in school for nursing. I was in school for law. So it was within that time that she was still in school and finishing up. So thank God for my parents, my mother, her mother, right? They took care of our firstborn, Victoria. And, I give them so much credit to the success that we have now, because if it wasn't for our parents, we wouldn't be where we are. Like I wouldn't have audacity to even take this plunge and this leap of faith, right? To open up something new, not knowing whether it's going to succeed or not, when I have a family at home. So it's definitely the parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how has working in real estate and immigration, they're so far apart from each other in terms of practice areas, right? Have you been able to, given what's going on now, especially, do you feel like it's gone better or worse in terms of the trajectory?
So as far as immigration, it's much more stringent now, right? So, you can ignore all the noise that's in the background of, we're proposing to do this, we're proposing to do, none of that has actually taken place, right? They're more stringent on the requirements. They're now more stringent on doing background checks of the proposed immigrants. So, once Trump took office, my phone was off the hook. I've even had green card holders calling me and saying, hey, am I in trouble? And I would tell them, why would you think you're in trouble? You have a valid green card. Have you committed any major offense? Have you committed any violent felonies? If the answer is no, you're good. Why are you so worried? So there was a sense of panic. Some of that did convert to clients, right? Clients that I could actually help, because my specialty is family-based immigration. So if I could help them in any way, I would.
Mm-hmm. And how did you manage with clients that are overseas? Was that difficult when the new administration took over, as far as like overseas clients, how you manage them, family-based immigration?
Right. So you always have the petitioner that's a U.S. citizen here stateside, right? So the petitioner is the one that makes the application. And that's the client that I would represent. And we would, use technology, WhatsApp, do FaceTimes, Zoom calls, Immigration is one of those things. You don't have to be licensed in the state that you are, which is specific. It's a federal area of law. So you could be anywhere in the country and I can represent you. You don't necessarily have to be in New York, and I don't necessarily have to be a New York attorney to represent you.
Oh, so do you get out-of-state clients? We do a little good portion. Oh, that's very nice. I didn't know. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. But we do have some.
So can you tell me, there's always a story about one particular case or one particular client that really hit home with you and you took personally? And we always ask all of our guests here, can you give us a story about one of those clients that either immigration or real estate based, that was really something that you took personal and you really went to bat for?
Yeah. So an immigration matter, I'll give you an example there. So I had this older gentleman that saw my ad for immigration. Now, he's been living with his wife from the Philippines for the past 15 years. They were happily married. He's older. He's on the verge of retirement. He was a doorman in the city. Great stand-up guy. But his wife crossed the border, right? So that's already an offense that we have to overcome. That's an additional step that we have to take. And he approaches me and says, how do we make this work? Now, if she hadn't crossed the border, it's a very simple application. You just put it in, prove a bona fide marriage. The marriage is legitimate, in good faith, and it's a straightforward case. But the fact that she went over the border and she was never stamped in means that she's here illegally. And so we put the petition in, but there's this extra step of doing something called a provisional waiver. Right. So now if she leaves the country ever, she's banned from the United States for the next 10 years. She can't re-enter just because she wasn't stamped in. Right. She wasn't admitted. No. That's the terminology. And so we have to do this additional step with a provisional waiver, which involves asking the government to essentially pardon her, forgive her, and take this 10-year ban away from her for her to successfully go to the Philippines, do the consular processing, get her immigrant visa there, and then successfully come back. So that was one of the cases that probably lasted 3 years. It was quite a journey. Wow. But once they were reunited, that's probably the happiest moment that I can imagine.
Oh, wow. That's very touching.
Yeah.
And you reunited the husband and wife, and
I always tell my clients, I'm here to provide the American dream, right? So part of the American dream is let's make you an American, right? Follow you and represent you throughout your citizenship journey. And then the other part of it is the dream part, right? Why are we all here? For opportunity. Exactly. What's the dream? It's
buy a house.
So I say, my firm represents the entire process of the American dream.
That's great.
So that's a good transition. So when in real estate, right, a lot of people ask, so, you do real estate. A lot of it is representing either the buyer or the seller. And also, and you said you do residential, right? So you also walk them through, any pitfalls that might fall in between in the transactional process.
Sure.
Can you go a little bit into that? Like
What does it involve?
Not just what is involved, but have you had situations that sometimes there's people, and I know this because I've come across them myself, where they're like, I don't really need a lawyer. I'll review the contract.
Not in
be
the state of New York. You have to be represented in the state of New York. In other states, in Pennsylvania, I do a lot of business in Pennsylvania on the personal side, invest there. It's just a title company. You come in and the title company essentially is the one
does everything,
oversees
for you.
everything. Yeah. But in New York, you have the buyer's attorney, you have the seller's attorney, even the bank has their own attorney, the title company. So there's a lot of moving parts involved, right? So to summarize my journey, I went from the 4 C's of grading diamonds, right? Color, clarity, and carat, to the 4 C's of residential closings, which is contract. That's the first phase, right? Clearance, commitment, and then closing. Right. So that's sort of been my journey. And then there was a lot of stuff in between, from jewelry to where I am now, that I'm happy to get into. But to answer your question, we provide white glove service in our firm, right? When clients come in, every single one of them has my cell phone number. I'm not one of those attorneys where it's hard to reach. You got to go through a secretary. Like, if you're a client, you sign a retainer, you have my telephone number. You can call me at any time. If it's urgent, right, a triage, I'll get back to you.
Right.
But yeah, and I sit down with them, I pull up a big screen, we go over all of the terms of the contract. Once we get the title report in, if I'm on the buyer side, we order a title report just to see if there's any liens, violations, judgments that can affect their ownership in the property. I review that with them, right? So I keep them apprised every step of the way. And even at closing, right? I've been at closings, and I don't want to disparage other attorneys. They're like, sign here, sign here, sign here. No, like, I explain every single document that they're signing to make sure that when they walk out, they know exactly what they're getting themselves into.
Oh, that's really important. A lot of people don't know what they're signing, and they just sign away because they say,
Because their attorney says
so. Exactly.
Said so.
But a lot of times they really don't know what they're signing. And I've had experience with that personally with a family member recently. They just didn't know, but it's really, really important. I also give my cell phone number out to my clients. I think it's really important, even though sometimes the phone can get hectic and overwhelming. But I think they like that fact that that you are reachable at any time, and you're very approachable and definitely personable. Yeah. So tell us, you said that you got into some other things in between.
Okay.
What are the things?
It was a big chunk that we missed, right? So jewelry opened up my practice. So within a year of my practice, right now I'm scaling it. I'm doing good. And I happened to do a closing for one of my close friends who's a pharmacist. And within that time, we sort of reconnected. We knew each other from high school. We knew each other from college. Really good friend of mine to this day. I call him my brother. And within that time, he tells me, hey, Serge, I'm launching this idea for my pharmacy, and I need sales reps. I need to really keep this off the ground. At that time, he only had one pharmacy. And we had a 5-hour lunch meeting where he's just pitching me, and I keep telling him, like, why are you pitching me? I'm full, like, I just started my venture. I just started law. Like, it took me 3 years to get to the point where I'm now going back into law, and here he is pitching me. And after that meeting, I had a really long conversation with myself, with my family. What do I do, right? So do I venture into this exciting field, or do I keep building my practice? And I said, you know what? I'm going to commit half of my time to you with growing this pharmacy. And then I'm going to commit the other half to my clients, because I can't just drop it, right? So a year into the pharmaceutical sales side of things, it starts taking off much faster than my practice does. And so I made the tough decision of closing up that Regis office and just having a home office, right? If clients needed to reach out to me, and again, I wasn't really marketing, I wasn't branding myself. It was all word of mouth by that point. So I made the tough decision to shut the doors and do this full time. And then spent the next 3 years doing pharmaceutical sales as a sales manager, focusing mostly on dermatology, building my book of business, had 200 prescribers all throughout New York City.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Eventually, 3 years in, we went from one pharmacy to 3 pharmacies. and there was a successful exit, right? They sold the pharmacies. And after that, I said, okay, that was a fun ride. It was great. That was fun. What's my next step? So I go into real estate. I go into real estate development, and I go into, acquiring assets and single family homes and building a portfolio for myself. And I spent the next 3 years doing that, like on the ground, actually going to the properties, identifying, assets that we're interested in, and then building a healthy portfolio for the next 3 years. Absolutely, like that's all I did. And most of it was in Pennsylvania. So I spent twice a week going back and forth from New York to Pennsylvania. Luckily, I have an Airbnb there. So when I needed to stay, I would stay over, right? And started developing that area. And, it was great. And that was during COVID. And COVID was the golden season, right? So we did really well over there. And once that wave, was over, I said to myself, okay, what's next? And then I was approached with an opportunity in Roslyn. You're from Roslyn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Old Westbury, but yeah, we're right near.
So I was approached with an opportunity. During COVID, I started collecting fine whiskeys and fine tequilas.
Oh my God. But is there anything you didn't do?
But that was just a passion of mine.
Okay.
Right? I started collecting it. And that hobby, if you want to call it, took over. And I was like, okay, why don't I open up a liquor store?
Oh my goodness.
And that's what I did. So there was a liquor store in town, right in the village over there, Roslyn Wine and Liquor, that was going out of business, luckily, right, for me.
For you. Right.
That's right. And that's what I did. So my partner and I acquired that. I spent the next 2 years rebuilding it, restocking it, rebranding it, putting it back on the market, like just putting it back on the map into a thriving business that it is now.
Wow. Yeah, I'm actually in awe because it's so to have your hands in so many different pots and to do them so well, it's really very rare. So I commend you and congratulations.
And what's inspiring about everything you're saying is that you're living proof exactly what we say. You don't necessarily, with the law degree, you could do so much different skills, and you use that degree probably when you were acquiring the business
Every single
day, right?
Yeah.
And so everything you did, even pharmaceutical sales, you probably, use your law degree.
Who's this guy in the suit and tie? Why is he walking in the suit and tie? I was probably the most formal guy there. But then I realized I got to loosen up a little bit, right? Because they want to just see a person that's loose, right?
Yeah.
So eventually, you got to loosen up a little bit. But it served me well in every single venture and every single idea and everything I do. The legal background provides you with so many opportunities that you not otherwise have.
And more than anything, you still came back to practicing law because now you have a thriving practice.
So while in Roslyn, I was like, I had no idea of Roslyn. I'm a South Shore guy, right? So I had no idea of Roslyn. I knew it was a thriving area. There was a lot of influx of people moving into Roslyn, but I wasn't really involved in Roslyn up until the liquor store. And so being hands-on for a year and a half, 2 years, I really fell in love with the community. I fell in love with the area. And I said to myself, there's massive potential here.
I agree.
And so that's what I did. Acquired a spot in Roslyn, and now we launched that as of a year. I opened up Kalantarov Law. Not that it was ever closed. I was always practicing in the background, but I never really had a home of my own, right? And so Kalantarov Law, and then I also run a brokerage, Exit Realty Signature, out of the same office. So I'm also a broker owner of a brokerage company. So if anyone's looking to buy or sell, let's plug.
Listen, you can do what you got to do.
Yeah, no, I'm really actually in awe of all this. A lot of our youth right now are very confused. They're very confused. They want to go into law, but they want to go into the most profitable law. A lot of them do go into personal injury. We're trying to get the message out that there is lots of different aspects of law that you can entertain, and you can actually do them at the same time.
Yeah.
So tell us, what would be your message to the youth listening to now? Because there are a lot of youth listening, and they want to know a path they can take. What would you suggest to them?
If someone comes up to me and they're considering going to law school, my number one answer is don't
Don't go to law school. I say the same
You know
thing.
how the Jewish conversion process, that you have to be turned away like 3 times or 7 times, whatever it is?
Yes.
I do the same thing. I turn them away. I said, don't do it. Especially if I sense that they want to sort of dabble with it, or I want to take a stab at this. This is not something you dabble with. This is not something you take a stab at. Either you're born with it and you want to pursue it like I did, like since the very beginning, I always wanted to be a lawyer, or you don't do it at all. So unless you're 100% committed and you want to do law school, then I'm going to answer any other questions. But from the very beginning, I turned them away and said, don't do it. Don't just dabble in it. But the message is commit yourself, right? If you're going to do this, there's no plan B. You burn the bridges down. Like, this is it.
And for those who want to diversify their practice, they want to practice more than one type of law.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? How would they go about implementing that into their practice?
It starts in law school, right? So my recommendation is always join the clinics that they offer in law school. So I'm sure you guys were part of clinics.
Yeah.
I was doing the clinic in St. John's. It was called it was a child advocacy clinic. And we represented children in family court, in the family court process. And so that gives you a taste of what it's like to practice law outside while you're in law school, right? So definitely do clinics. Definitely venture out into taking internships, right? Go out, join a firm that does this, join a firm that does this. Just try everything and then settle on the stuff that makes you passionate the most and what you see yourself doing in the future.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice for a lot of our youth who are not really sure what part of law that they want to really invest in. What else can you tell us about basically your family life? Like how do you juggle now? You have 4 children.
4 children, yeah.
A lot of us I also have 4 children. She also has 4 children. It's not easy to balance everything. You want to try to spend as much time with your children and your family. And how do you balance everything right now?
Yeah. This is why I've always ventured out. I was always an entrepreneur, just to have complete control of my time. Right. And so if I need to take the day off, I take the day off. Like my family is always my priority. As much as I love my clients, but my family is always my priority. So you find time, you make time, right? So throughout the day, and it doesn't have to be a whole day venture. It could be, during the day, the kid needs to do this and this, or they have soccer practice. And you devote just that 1 hour, 2 hours, and then go back into the office, right? Luckily, we have laptops. I don't need to physically be in the office. I can operate from anywhere. I can go take a trip in Cancun and I can still operate, right? Like this is the modern day of technology. So you find the time, right? Plus, I have a home office, when I really need to be in the house. Like right now, my kids are homesick. And if I need to be there, I'll be there. Right. So you definitely find the time. You find time for your children. You find time for your spouse. You make date nights. You find time for your parents. It's all a part of life that you need to manage.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And I think Margarita and I have spoke about this with many other lawyers about the same thing. No matter what comes your way, you always have to have time, not just for family, but for yourself.
Yeah.
Sanity. You still have to be sane in order to continue doing what you do. And with that in mind, I have a question. Is there one lesson that you've learned that you would say so that others won't make the same mistake?
I'm going to give you a story from law school, right? So first year of law school, I told you, like 2 weeks in, and I'm not feeling it. Right? That is why I turned so many people down, because me, as committed as I was from a very young age, knowing that I want to be a lawyer, 2 weeks in, I was like, this is not for me. I don't want to do it. Like I'm quitting. So I remember that specific day, I cut the rest of class. I don't go. I already have my mindset like, I'm not going to do this. I already have visions of, I'm going to start a little Italian restaurant somewhere in the city. Take life easy. Like, why do I need this stress? That was the most stressful I've been in the matter of 2 weeks. We just started. Yeah. I got 3 years ahead of me, right? And so I remember that specific day. And And I was the next day I told myself, I'm going into the dean's office. I'm withdrawing my seat. And I remember having this conversation. Luckily, one of my cousins who's a really good, confidant, right? And I think every person needs that one person in life that they can confide in, right? In my family, that's me. But even myself, I need that someone, and we all do.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, so he catches wind of this, and this is all happening within that day, right? I get on the phone with my mother, my wife. I was like, I'm not doing that. He catches wind. Hey, Serge, what's going on? How's everything's like? What are you up to? I was like, not much. Just having a walk in Cunningham Park. Reevaluating my whole life. And so he's like, okay, I'll be there in a couple of minutes, right? He's a doctor, very busy, very successful. So he meets with me and we're walking on the track in Cunningham, and he's like, listen, just take it day by day. That's all you really need to do. Forget, 3 years, like 3 years sounds such a long time. Do day by day, right? And then week by week, and then month by month. All of a sudden, you're into the first term, right? Now you got the second term, right? After the second term, you're already a year in.
Yeah.
Now you got 2 years left, right? So number one is have a confidant, right? So a mentor, whatever you want to call it, somebody that you can confide in that gives you really good advice, somebody that knows how to listen. And number two is just take it day by day. Don't quit. That's it. Just commit. And I don't want to paint this picture like law school was terrible. Just the first year. Yeah. Right. The second year, I loved it. And it's actually so interesting. The less you try, the better. I was breaking my head first year, but then second, I was like,
well, I think it's also a combination of you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Because I agree with you. I was a legal studies major with you in St. John's, and I thought the same thing you did, bringing back to what you said earlier. And you're right. When you come into law school, it's a completely different ballgame.
It is.
It's you don't. And I think the reason we're also in the first year, like everything you said, I just went back to a couple of years back, and I'm like, oh my God, I remember all of this, because you don't know what's going to happen next, and you're afraid to fail, and you're afraid to oh my God, what's going to happen if I don't, keep going. And then it's the uncertainty that makes you even more doubt yourself more than anything. I'm sure that's what you were feeling. You're like, I could do so much more different things. Why am I killing myself here for 3 years?
And I knew my capabilities. Whatever was going to turn into gold anyway, right? So my question was, do I do that with law, and do I do that with something else? But I'm glad I stuck around because it served me well.
Yeah, I remember my first year of law school, a lot of people actually, after the first 2 weeks, it was a good amount of people who withdrew their seats. They started dropping like flies. I said, I was sitting next to somebody and they're gone. But it's true. Once you take it day by day and you get into it, and a week turns into 3 and a 3 turns into 6. And before you know it, your first semester is done. And then you're like, okay, this really isn't as bad as I thought it would be.
And you're too deep in. You're like,
I feel like, I actually thought about quitting law school after my first semester. And I said, I'm already too deep in it. I'm already too invested. So I'm just doing it, and that's it. And I did, and it was fine. But it's a very important and good message to give out to our youth. And I want to thank you for that. I took some lessons home today. I think you did too.
Definitely.
I think our youth who are listening, and anybody else who's listening out there who wants to diversify themselves or looking for a different path to go, I think this is really helpful information. We're going to put your information in our link.
Yes.
And I'll be referring any immigration, real estate that I have to you. I think you're an amazing attorney. You're very well versed. And I really thank you for coming today and speaking to us.
Thank you. It was I called him and he didn't even say no. He said, when? Give me a time and date. I'd love to come and chat with you. And, what I appreciate is that you, no matter what, and I've known you for years, anytime you call him, he's always available to answer any quick question, to help you with anything. And I've known him since college. And I haven't seen him in years. But when I called him and I said, listen, I feel like you would be so good to talk to, given your trajectory, because I've seen him. I haven't spoken to him I've seen him do different things. And I'm like, wasn't he doing law? And like just speaking to you right now and going down your whole timeline, I'm like, okay, now I see why he was all over the place. And you know what? It served you so well because you've come like full circle and you're still, practicing law and doing very well at that too.
Yeah, I think you were actually the perfect guest that we needed to have today because a lot of our guests are very focused on a specific practice area and they really are a little bit scared to diversify themselves. They want to make themselves so-called experts in their field.
Which is a great thing too.
Yeah, it's a great thing too, but you don't have to. There's other options. There's other things you can do. Dabble here, dabble there, just like you did. Feel out the field and see where you feel like you belong. And that's a really important message.
If you can provide value to your clients, why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
This was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and pleasure reconnecting with you.
Yeah,
So it's been years.
Thank you, Sergey. Be well.
If you liked today's episode, please like, subscribe, and please stay up to date with our upcoming episodes as they come out.
Thank you.